But unfortunately, that's how it is. Like I'm even like I'm not doing Rico, I'm not doing Endo, I'm not covering the DI system. So I'm covering a lot of systems just to make sure that you cover the most important, and we spend some time. Like I think that the technical does a good job in presenting the materials to you guys. Again, if you have questions, if anything from now on, just feel free to raise your hand. There's no stupid questions. And that's something that I know that some of you are extremely shy. Just make sure to raise your hand and just ask a question, because I'm pretty sure that 50% of the class is the same problem, the same question, that they're just scared of. So make sure if you're super shy, after class, I'm always here. I have like 15 minutes before going to another class, so I can always answer or address all your issues that you're having. Okay? Just make sure to ask your questions. Don't go home without, I don't know, the answer to all the questions you have or any questions. So today we're going to cover, we're going to start covering the respiratory system. I might, since this is, believe it or not, it is a very complicated system. I'm going to try to go slower just to make sure that you guys understand things. I might use some kind of the kidney physiology to make sure that you understand the respiratory physiology, but make sure to review your anatomy before getting into all the physiology that we're going to cover. Okay? All right, so let me show you this little overview of the respiratory system before we get into it.
The respiratory system functions to move air into and out of the lungs and provides a surface for gas exchange. The upper respiratory tract consists of the external nose, nasal cavity, and pharynx. The lower respiratory tract includes the larynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs. Inhaled air enters the nasal cavity, where it is cleaned, warmed, and humidified on its way through the pharynx, a shared region of the respiratory and digestive systems. Leaving the pharynx, air enters the larynx, where two pairs of ligaments, together with the mucosa covering them, form the vestibular and vocal folds. These folds help prevent foreign particles, including food, from entering the lower respiratory system. The vocal folds are also known as the true vocal cords because they produce sound when air passes between them. Air next enters the tracheobronchial tree. The trachea, a 10 to 12 centimeter long tube supported by C-shaped cartilages, maintains an open passageway to and from the lungs. The trachea divides into two primary bronchi. As the bronchi enter the lungs, they continue to divide into smaller and smaller bronchi, and ultimately into terminal bronchioles. Each terminal bronchiole divides repetitively to form respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and alveolar sacs. Each alveolar sac is formed by a group of alveoli. Alveoli are surrounded by pulmonary capillaries. The ultra-thin walls of the alveoli and capillaries serve as a surface for gas exchange between the air and blood. Oxygen diffuses across this membrane into the blood, while carbon dioxide moves from the blood back into the air where it is expelled during exhalation.
All right, so I guess that if you understand that, we're good to go. Right? All right. That was a lot of information in very little time. But now you have an idea of how all the structures and everything is arranged within the pulmonary system. All right, so we're going to cover now. We're going to get into the anatomy and introduction of everything that we're going to. So basically, and I think that you understand this, and in order to understand all the different things that we're going to cover within the respiratory system, you have to understand that every single time you are, let's say, during the process of breathing, you're bringing air in, also you're expelling air out, right? So you are inspiring and you are expiring. Okay? That's the respiratory side. We're going to cover all the single events later on, but you have to know that, and we're going to cover all the physics behind it. As air moves in and air moves out, there are different pressure gradients that are generated, and those gradients are the ones that allow the movement also of air within the different structures of the respiratory system. If you remember the last part of the video, so you remember those like the alveoli, the group of alveoli that look like grapes, right? All those alveoli, they are richly vascularized. You're going to have that every single one of those little alveoli, or like little grapes that you find there, they have arteries, they have not arteries, they have capillaries, they have arterioles, they have capillaries, and they have veins. They're surrounded by them. They're like richly vascularized, which is necessary for all the oxygen that reaches our lungs, right, gets into the circulation so that from there it can move to the different cells of your body, right? So gas exchange is critical, but for that you need air moving in, right? And at the same time, all the waste products that are in a way acquired during this gas exchange process, right? They're expired out of your body. Okay? So we're talking about respiration, there is external and there is internal respiration, and you can see it here. So basically, the external respiration is the one that you're probably more aware of. That's the one where there is ventilation, air moving in, air moving out, inspiration, expiration, and gas exchange. That's all external respiration. And the respiration that we are not aware of it because it's more at the cellular level, that's called internal respiration. Okay? Because that occurs within the cells of the different tissues. So you need to know the difference between the two. So again, gas exchange, one of the most important functions of the respiratory system, basically the mechanism by which things move from one side to another one, it's through diffusion. So this is important. So things are diffused. And again, because there is a concentration gradient of substances, nutrients, and things are going to move from one side to the other side. So basically, when you're breathing air in, when you're expiring, there is oxygen, more oxygen than the one you're going to find within your vasculature, right? So just because there is that concentration gradient, oxygen is going to move in, right? And then CO2 is going to go out from the vasculature and going to go inside your alveoli, right? So I think that it wasn't mentioned in the video, but basically we have two areas where, like anatomically, your respiratory system is divided into conduction zone and respiratory zone. So your conduction zone, that's basically the space from from your nose all the way down to your terminal bronchus. So it's gonna be the area it's gonna be the bridge that is gonna conduct oxygen and air. But in all those structures from the nose all the way down to the terminal bronchioles, there is no gas exchange. So that's why it's just a conduction zone. It's just like a bridge, like a tube. The respiratory zone, which is from terminal bronchioles all the way down to the alveoli, right? That's your respiratory zone. When we talk about respiratory zone, that's where gas exchange occurs. So in your respiratory zone, gas exchange occurs. Your conduction zone, there is no gas exchange. So that means that it's everything but the alveoli. Okay? So let me show you this video that shows you a little bit how diffusion works. Okay? Ready?
In the lungs, gas exchange takes place in the terminal portion of the bronchial tree. Alveoli are small saccular outpocketings of the respiratory bronchioles and alveolar ducts. Each alveolus is about 250 micrometers in diameter and abuts other alveoli There are millions of alveoli in each lung. The alveolar wall consists of two specialized cell types. Type 1 cells are thin, squamous epithelial cells that form 90% of the alveolar surface. The larger cuboidal type 2 cells secrete pulmonary surfactant that coats the inner surface of the alveolus. This surfactant reduces surface tension and prevents the collapse of the alveolus. Pulmonary capillaries form a network around each alveolus. A thin barrier, the respiratory membrane, separates capillary blood from air in the alveolus. The respiratory membrane is comprised of the capillary endothelial cell, the alveolar type 1 epithelial cell, and their fused basement membranes. It has a total thickness of only 5 micrometers, facilitating the rapid exchange of carbon dioxide from blood into the alveolus and oxygen from the alveolus into the blood. Oxygen and carbon dioxide diffuse across the respiratory membrane due to differences in partial pressure. Oxygen diffuses from a high partial pressure, or PO2, in the alveolus to a relatively low PO2 in the pulmonary capillaries. Similarly, carbon dioxide diffuses from a high PCO2 in the blood to a relatively low PCO2 in the alveolus.
All right, so did you understand how diffusion happens? Yes? Again, this is because there is a concentration gradient that is present. Because on one side, on the respiratory side, we have a high pressure of oxygen here on one side, and in your circulatory or within your capillaries, you have low oxygen. And remember, when we're talking about here the pulmonary capillaries, we're talking about the blood that is reaching or getting that area. This is all deoxygenated blood, right? Because before getting into your pulmonary or respiratory circulation, you already have all throughout your systemic circulation, where all the nutrients and oxygen were delivered to all the different cells of your body. So after you pass it through the capillaries of your systemic circulation, all blood goes back to the right side of the heart, from where it goes again into your pulmonary circulation for oxygenation. So since there is low oxygen, right, the oxygen that you're going to find here within the alveoli is going to be, in terms of concentration, higher than the one that you're going to find in the blood. So just because of that pressure gradient or concentration gradient that you're going to find, oxygen is going to move from this direction of within the circulatory system to the circulatory system. And the opposite is going to happen with the CO2, right? All right. So, in order to understand the respiratory system, we need to understand, I'm going to say, the main structure, which is the alveoli. The alveoli, as we saw there, there are little sacs, and within those little sacs, air sacs, that's where gas exchange occurs. There are millions of those. The square footage of, if we spread them out, it's really, really large. As you will see here, I guess in my next slide. The surface area, and again, people keep saying this, and I did math, and it doesn't make sense. But they say that if you spread this out, all your alveoli, right, the surface area of the lung is roughly the same as the next one. I actually did the math, and I like it. So I'm confused. But it's large. It's just for you to see from a different perspective, all the things you have in your body. All right, so if you remember, so here, this is an image where we made through one of the alveoli, right? So what are the things that we see here? So you see here, so this is what where I'm drawing on, right? Basically, all of this is an alveoli, right? You can see here that these are lines, I'm going to say here, what are the things, what are the cells that line the alveoli? 91 alveolar cells, right? That's 90%. That's 90% of like the structure here within the alveoli. Then the other 10% is gonna be like you're gonna have your type 2 alveolar cells. These type 2 alveolar cells secrete what substance? Surfactant. You've heard about surfactant before? Yes? What is surfactant? Tell me. It lowers, so your surfactant, I think there's a problem with this computer now that everything that I draw is, I don't know, there is a big delay here. Basically what surfactant does, it lowers the surface tension forces within the alveoli. That's the main function. So surfactant is going to decrease long recoil and increase compliance. All right, let me ask you this question. All right, so we're talking about, so what is that saying? Basically, if I ask you what's compliance, what would you tell me? What about elasticity? So what is elasticity? That's a concept. Huh? So if I have a, let's just pretend I have a rubber band here, a thick rubber band right in my hand. If I have this rubber band here right now, and I do this, I stretch the rubber band, and I say that this is a very elastic rubber band? Yes or no? No, right? I know that we grew up, and this is our parents' fault, I guess, like thinking that this, like the ability to stretch is elasticity, but it's completely the opposite, right? It's the ability to recoil back. That's what elasticity is. And compliance is the opposite. Compliance, if I have this piece of rubber in my hand, the ability to stretch. So this is a very compliant, let's say, rubber band, right? And the ability of this rubber band to recoil back to the original position, that's elasticity, right? I know, again, like I always say that, like, I don't know, like for example, our shorts, like at some point, right? If you use them a lot or if you stretch them a lot, what happens to our shorts, right? They lose that elasticity, right? The ability to recoil back to the original position, right? So elasticity is clear, compliance is clear, yes? All right, if I have, I'm going to make sure that you know this. If I have two patients, I have here one that is 1 year old, and I have an 80-year-old patient. Who has the greatest compliance? The one, the 80? The 1 year old, the 80-year-old. So you see that you don't understand what was elasticity and compliance. So who do you think is going to have more elastic tissue? The 1 year old, right? It's more flexible, right? So if you have the higher, let's say more elastic, right? Increased elasticity, it's going to have, the 1 year old is going to have decreased compliance, right? And that's a concept, that's what you got to have in your mind. So in generally speaking, like elasticity is inversely proportional to compliance, right? No? Or is it the same? Inversely proportional, right? If I have high compliance, if something has a high compliance, it has reduced elasticity. Does that make sense? If I have a all pair of shorts, right? And let's say I gain 100 pounds and I stretch those shorts to the max, right? So those shorts are, let's say, this big, right? So those shorts have a high compliance, right? Because they're very compliant and very generous with me when I was 400 pounds, right? And what happens to those shorts? If let's say I ended up losing 250 pounds, I want to wear those shorts again. They will fit, right? They will fall. So they lose elasticity, right? So if something has increased compliance, right, it's always going to have reduced elasticity. So what can I say? Like out of that, I can always say that compliance is inversely related to elasticity, right? And that's a concept that you should never forget. Does that make sense? Yes? So surfactant, and we're going to cover that later on. And I don't know if you guys have rotated in like pediatric units. No? Have you seen premature babies? And why do you think they don't send them home? And they have to be there like, at the hospital with an incubator. Because their lungs were not mature enough, right? They don't have the tattoo on the other cells. They have no surfactant. They're not able to produce surfactant by themselves, right? So that's why they keep them there. They get treated in a way so that their lungs are in a way triggered or activated to mature faster, so they can generate their own surfactant. So that way we prevent collapsing of the lungs. We prevent that, so the surfactant is going to decrease the lung recoil, right? That's what we want, right? And increase compliance, right? In patients that, like let's say premature babies, you want to prevent lung collapse. So that's why the observation and the incubator is waiting and giving them medication for them to mature their lungs. So normally if you want to prevent it, if you want to prevent it, you normally want to wait at least after 7 months of pregnancy. That's when I think the babies are falling off the produce surfactant by themselves. All right? Is that good enough? Yes? So what are the things that you see here? So you see here, you have here an alveoli, right? You see here that they're surrounded by capillaries, right? And these capillaries, these are lined by which type of cells? Endothelial cells, right? And within the capillaries, we're going to find blood. We're going to find here red blood cells. We're going to find all kinds of cells, right? Yes? If we're talking about like within the pulmonary capillaries, do you remember that renin-angiotensin aldosterone system? So what's secreted here? What substance does your endothelial cells secrete here? ACE, right? Remember that, right? Angiotensin converting enzyme. Yes? Can I move on? Yes. All right, thank you guys. All right. I did that already. These are just more pictures. We can skip this. So basically, and this is just a summary of what I already said, like more than 90% of the cells within your alveoli are type 1. So they provide the area for gas exchange to occur. And the type 2 are the ones that are in charge of secreting surfactant, right? All right. So at the very beginning, it was mentioned the pathway of air. Just make sure you know this. You have to flat, correct? Something similar without the traffic. Yes. So just make sure you know this, because you're gonna have a question where you'll have to choose the right answer or the correct order of air movement. Okay? So just know that first, air is gonna travel through your nose, right? It's gonna go into your pharynx. From here, it's gonna go to the larynx, then your trachea. Then from here it goes to the right and left primary bronchi, then secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and then your terminal bronchi. So remember that up to this point, like from here, to up all the way up to the down to the terminal bronchial, what zone are we talking about? Conductive zone, right? And from here, from the respiratory zone here, we have where we normally have the terminal, your alveoli, that's where we start the respiratory zone. Okay? I guess that we don't need to cover this, right? We already know the conductive zone. Why is it conductive? Because it just works as a bridge that just allows conduction of air. But in all the structures that you find here within your conductive zone, there is no gas exchange. Okay? Where does gas exchange occur? Here, right? Your alveolus and your terminal, right? All right. So I guess that we can skip this, right? Yes? I doubt it. Now I'm going to ask you questions with that. All right. So what are the functions of the conductive zone? Basically, the most important one is to transport air to the lungs. Right? It also is going to warm, humidify, filter, and clean the air. Remember that within your conductive zone you have mucus, right? And all the particles that sometimes we breathe in that shouldn't go to your alveoli, right? They're all trapped. And if you remember, I don't know if you remember all the cilia that we covered at the very beginning. You remember the disease where there were immotile cilia? Do you remember a syndrome that I mentioned to you guys that started with K? No? No? Wow. Do you remember that? No? Really? I think I do already tested on your first exam. All right, probably I did it in the previous class. No, this is the first lecture. All right. When I talked about the cells and all the structures. Microtubule cilia. All right. So normally you have cilia within your conductive zone that is gonna move the particles right away from the lung, right? So basically, now that I talked about this syndrome, it's called immotile cilia. The cilia there doesn't move anything, right? And for example, the patients who suffer this disease, they normally have chronic infections because their cilia cannot, like all the mucus they produce and all the particles they, let's say they acquire, they cannot be moved out of the system. So there is like a lot of bacteria like damages the culture for like things to grow there, right? So they're prone to infections in like really severe cases. These patients at some point of their life they need lung transplant. They also have, I don't know if you, let's say if I can draw something like this. Do you know what is this? Or 1 point. This is a beautiful drawing, no? Sperm, right? And sperm, how do you think it moves? Because there is a cilia here, right? So patients with this syndrome here, they can actually not, their sperm doesn't move. The same with the women, like their fallopian tubes cannot like move the ovum, right? The egg for implantation. So then all these people they're sterile. All right, I didn't talk about this syndrome. All right, you're not going to be tested on this. So when talking about the lungs in general, you have to remember that they're contained within a cavity, which is your thoracic cavity, right? And within your thorax, you have the heart, the trachea, the esophagus, the thymus, right? And then the lungs, they're also there, right? you're going to see that the lungs, they're covered by connective tissue. Right? You remember that also the heart was connected, so it was covered with connective tissue. So basically, there is connective tissue within two areas. There is connective tissue surrounding your lungs, and that's called visceral pleura. And there is also connective tissue surrounding or lining the thoracic wall, and that's called the parietal pleura. So just because we have these two connective tissues like close to each other, there is a space that is created with this two, and this is called an intrapleural space. Just remember that, okay, at this point. So basically, let me show you. So this is a transverse section here in the thorax, right? You can see here your lungs here in red. You see here, you can see here in blue, right? That your lungs, they're covered by connective tissue, and that connective tissue is called what? Visceral pleura. And you see here that lining the thoracic cavity, we have in green, we have connective tissue, and that's called what? Pleural, right? Parietal pleura, right? And the space that you see here between these two, this is called interpleural space, right? You see here what we have here. We have some great vessels here. Here we have the heart, right? Here we have the vertebrae, right? Here we have the spinal cord, right? Yes. I'm going to explain that in a second, like with more. So I'm pretty sure that you have seen X-rays in the past, right? You can tell the difference, right? Between a normal female and a normal male. Yes? So you can see the difference there? Pretty obvious, right? Yes or no? Okay, I'm not going to say anything. All right, so we need to cover ventilation, and this is where things can probably get a little bit more complicated. Okay, you gotta have more imagination. Okay, so basically, we're talking about ventilation. You're talking about like movement of air, right? Air moves in or moves out, right? And this is because there is pressure difference, right? Here we need to understand what compliance is. We already know that. We need to know elasticity, and we mentioned very briefly about surface tension. Do you remember? So surfactant, do you think that it's going to increase or decrease surface tension? It's going to lower your surface tension. So all those physical properties, we have an idea, I guess, right now. All right. So now we're going to talk about fractures. Okay? So your textbook makes it really difficult to understand. I'm going to try to explain or make it a lot much